On the morning of my 30th birthday, I expected silence but not a $45,000 blow straight to my bank account. The fraud alert came at 7:15 a.m. Pacific Crest Resort, Malibu, luxury suite, spa treatments, rooftop bar, my platinum card, the one only I was supposed to have. They thought I wouldn't notice, that I'd swallow it like every other betrayal. This time, they were dead wrong. My name is Rachel Monroe, and I've spent 36 years learning that blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. The realization crystallized completely at 7:15 on a Tuesday morning in my Portland apartment, staring at my phone screen while coffee turned cold in my hands. The fraud alert read like a punch to the gut. Alert large transaction detected. $45,000 charged to account ending in 7834. Pacific Crest Resort, Malibu, CA. If this wasn't you, call immediately. Pacific Crest Resort. I'd researched it once for a client presentation at Nova Pixel, my UX design firm. $2,500 a night for their cheapest suite. Ocean views, private terraces, a spa that charged $300 for a facial. The kind of place where trust fund kids went to find themselves between semesters. My fingers shook as I pulled up the detailed charges. $45,317, broken down 7 nights in the presidential suite. Spa packages for 3, rooftop bar tabs that could fund a small startup, room service bills that made my monthly grocery budget look like pocket change. 3 people. The number burned in my mind. I called the fraud department first, hoping against hope this was some elaborate identity theft. The customer service representative, bored and efficient, confirmed my worst fear. The cardholder authorized an additional user 18 months ago, a Vanessa Monroe. The charges appear legitimate, ma'am. Same billing address, proper verification codes. Vanessa, my 28-year-old sister who hadn't held a job longer than 3 months in her entire adult life, who lived in my childhood bedroom, sleeping until noon, talking endlessly about her revolutionary startup ideas while eating $60 takeout on my parents' dime, or rather, on mine. The memory hit like ice water, Vanessa asking to borrow my card for emergencies when she moved back home, Mom standing behind her, that familiar look of gentle manipulation. Just until she gets back on her feet. Honey, you know how hard it's been for her. I'd said yes because saying no to my family had never been an option. My hands moved automatically, dialing my parents' landline. 3 rings. 4. Then my father's voice, gruff with morning irritation. Rachel, bit early, isn't it? Dad. My voice came out steadier than I felt. I need to ask you about something. There's been a charge on my credit card. $45,000. At a resort in Malibu. Silence. Not the shocked silence of someone learning terrible news. The careful silence of someone caught. Oh, that. He cleared his throat. Your mother and I took Vanessa on a little getaway. The girl's been under so much stress with her projects. Doctor said she needed a change of scenery. The casual tone made my vision blur. A little getaway. $45,000 was a little getaway. Dad, that's my money, my credit card. You didn't ask. Come on, Rachel. His voice carried that edge of impatience I remembered from childhood, the tone that meant the conversation was over whether I agreed or not. You'll make it back. You always do. It's not like you're struggling. The line clicked as someone picked up an extension. Mom's voice. Honey, sweet and reasonable. Rachel, sweetheart, don't make this into something bigger than it needs to be. We just wanted to help Vanessa decompress. You know how sensitive she is. Sensitive. The word they'd used to excuse Vanessa's behavior since we were children. Sensitive when she broke my things in tantrums. Sensitive when she stole my birthday money. Sensitive when she crashed my car senior year and I had to take the bus to my part-time job for 6 months to pay for repairs. This isn't about Vanessa being sensitive, I said, surprised by the cold steadiness in my voice. This is about you stealing from me. Stealing, Mom's voice pitched higher, wounded. Rachel Monroe, how dare you use that word? We're family. Everything we do is for this family. Then why didn't you ask first? Because we knew you'd overthink it. Dad cut in. Make it complicated. It's not like it's going to break you. You've got that fancy tech job, no kids, no real responsibilities. What do you need all that money for anyway? The question hung in the air like poison gas. What did I need money for? The question revealed everything they saw my life, my work, my careful financial planning as somehow less legitimate than their immediate wants. I need it because it's mine, I said quietly. Well, it's spent now, Dad said with finality. We'll pay you back when we can. Vanessa's startup might actually go somewhere this time. Might? When we can? The same empty promises they'd been making for 18 months. I hung up without saying goodbye, my hand cramping around the phone. Outside my apartment window, Portland's morning rain drummed against the glass, each drop a tiny percussion of my growing rage. They thought I wouldn't fight back. They thought I'd swallow this like I'd swallowed everything else, the guilt, the manipulation, the endless expectation that I'd be the responsible one, the successful one, the one who fixed everyone else's problems while my own dreams slowly suffocated under the weight of their needs. For 18 months, I'd been their personal ATM, but they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd forgotten that I was the one who actually read contracts. 18 months earlier, I'd been living in my own one-bedroom apartment in Southeast Portland, small but mine, with exposed brick walls and windows that caught the morning light just right. I had savings, a growing portfolio, plans for a down payment on a house. Then Dad called at 11:30 on a Wednesday night, his voice thick with something between panic and shame. Rachel, we need you to come home. We're going to lose the house. The words hit like a physical blow. The house, my childhood home in Beaverton, where Mom still kept my honor roll certificates on the refrigerator, where Dad's woodworking shop in the garage held 20 years of half-finished projects, the foundation of everything I thought was stable. What happened? The restaurant venture. His voice cracked. Martin's gastropub. The investors pulled out. We're behind on the mortgage, the second mortgage, everything. The bank's threatening foreclosure. Martin's gastropub. 6 months of Dad's dreams poured into a failed restaurant in a strip mall where 3 other restaurants had already died. I'd tried to warn him about the location, the oversaturated market, the optimistic projections that ignored basic business realities. He'd waved away my concerns with that familiar dismissal. You don't understand the restaurant business, honey. Now I understood the consequences. I drove to Beaverton that night, my emergency fund already mentally allocated before I walked through the front door. The house felt smaller, shabbier, filled with the particular tension that comes when adults realize they've gambled with their children's security and lost. Mom sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by bills and notices, her reading glasses reflecting the harsh overhead light. Vanessa lounged on the couch, scrolling through her phone, seemingly oblivious to the crisis swirling around her. How much, I asked. Dad handed me a folder thick with red-stamped documents. $87,000 in total debt, missed mortgage payments, maxed credit cards, a second mortgage they'd taken out to fund the restaurant without telling me. I signed the loan guarantees that night, my signature sealing my fate. $87,000 to save their house, paid from my savings, my retirement fund, everything I'd built over 10 years of careful living and smart investing. Just until we get back on our feet, Mom promised, squeezing my hand. 6 months, maybe a year. But 6 months became 12, and 12 became 18. The house was saved, but I was trapped. The financial bleeding never stopped. First, it was just the mortgage and the immediate debt. Then Dad's truck needed major repairs. Mom's arthritis medication wasn't fully covered by insurance. The roof leaked. The furnace died in February. Always something urgent. Always something that couldn't wait. Always something that somehow became my responsibility. Vanessa had moved back home around the same time, announcing that she was pivoting her career toward entrepreneurship. In practice, this meant sleeping until noon, spending afternoons at coffee shops networking, and evenings watching Netflix while talking about her revolutionary app ideas. It's going to be like Uber, but for wellness, she'd explain to anyone who'd listen, gesturing wildly with hands that had never calloused from real work. Imagine being able to summon a meditation expert or a nutritionist to your location in under 30 minutes. When I pointed out the obvious logistical and liability issues, she'd look at me with that particular brand of pity reserved for people who didn't understand innovation. Meanwhile, I was paying for everything, groceries and not just basics, but Vanessa's organic, gluten-free, Instagram-worthy food preferences, internet for her research, gas for her car, her phone bill, her health insurance, the Netflix subscription she used for market research. Every month, I'd drive from my cramped studio apartment I'd downgraded to save money to Beaverton with envelopes of cash and checks, utilities, insurance, property taxes, even the weekly housekeeping service Mom claimed was medically necessary for her anxiety. I stopped buying new clothes. I canceled my gym membership, my streaming services, my magazine subscriptions. I ate ramen and peanut butter sandwiches while my family dined on steaks I'd paid for. I worked overtime constantly, taking every freelance project I could find, building websites and apps late into the night to fund their comfortable existence. Anytime I expressed frustration, Mom would deploy her signature move, the gentle guilt trip wrapped in maternal concern. I know it's hard, sweetheart, but not everyone is as strong and capable as you are. Vanessa is still finding herself. Your father is dealing with the shame of the business failure. I'm holding this family together, but I need your help. You're the only one who can do this. Strong and capable. The words that had followed me since childhood. The expectation that I'd always be the one to fix things, to sacrifice, to be responsible for everyone else's poor decisions. I'd believed it was temporary. I'd believed they'd find ways to contribute, to rebuild, to gradually take back the financial responsibility for their own lives. Instead, they'd grown comfortable with my subsidies, more than comfortable entitled to them. The final insult was discovering that while I was eating ramen, Vanessa had been ordering $60 sushi dinners delivered to the house. While I was working 80-hour weeks, she was getting weekly massages and monthly spa treatments. While I was deferring my own dental work, she was getting Botox injections for her brand development, all charged to credit cards I was ultimately responsible for. The Malibu trip wasn't an aberration. It was the logical conclusion of 18 months of escalating exploitation. They'd turned me into their personal bank, their insurance policy against consequences, their enabler-in-chief, and they'd done it so gradually, with such skill at emotional manipulation, that I'd almost convinced myself it was normal. Almost. But $45,000 was hard to rationalize as normal. After hanging up on my parents, I spent the rest of the morning in a state of cold, methodical fury. I called in sick to NovaPixel the first time I'd used a sick day in 2 years and spread my financial records across my dining table like a forensic accountant preparing for trial. The credit card statements told a story I'd been too trusting to read before. I'd been checking balances monthly, seeing the charges, assuming they were necessities. Food, gas, utilities, medical expenses. Reasonable things for a family in transition. But when I examined 18 months of line items with the attention I'd normally reserve for a complex UX audit, the pattern emerged like a photograph developing in poison. Whole Foods, $347, not for a month for a single shopping trip. Organic everything, premium cuts of meat, imported cheeses, wine that cost more per bottle than my weekly food budget. Nordstrom, $892, 2 days after I'd transferred money for emergency roof repairs. Alaska Airlines 6 round-trip tickets to San Francisco. The weekend Vanessa claimed she was networking with potential investors. Sephora, Williams-Sonoma, REI, Anthropologie. A steady stream of charges that painted a picture of people living well beyond their means while I ate peanut butter sandwiches and wore the same 3 work outfits in rotation. But it was the automatic email forwarding that broke something fundamental inside me. I'd set up Gmail forwarding months ago when Mom complained about missing important notifications. Just until I get better at checking email regularly. Honey. Another temporary measure that had become permanent. Another small erosion of boundaries that seemed reasonable in isolation. The forwarded emails sat in a folder I rarely checked, hundreds of them accumulating like evidence of my own willful blindness. Confirmation emails, shipping notifications, receipts for purchases I'd never approved or even known about. But buried in the middle of the digital paper trail was something else, a voice memo, accidentally forwarded when Vanessa had replied to a hotel confirmation email. My hands shook as I clicked play. Vanessa's laugh came through my laptop speakers, bright and careless. Oh my God, you should see this place. The bathroom is bigger than Rachel's entire apartment, and the view. Keep your voice down, Mom's voice, sharper. The walls aren't that thick. Relax, she's at work. Besides, she won't check the credit card until the end of the month. We'll figure out how to explain it by then. We always do. A pause. The sound of what might have been champagne glasses clinking. I still think we should have told her. Dad's voice, uncomfortable but not guilty enough to matter. Told her that Vanessa deserves a break after all the stress she's been under, that we needed family time. Rachel's always been difficult about money. She'd have found a way to make it complicated. She works so hard, Dad said, but his voice carried no conviction. Vanessa laughed again. She works hard because she likes to work hard. Some people are just built that way. Besides, what else is she going to spend it on? She doesn't even date anymore. The casual cruelty in her voice was breathtaking, as if my increasingly isolated, work-focused existence was a character flaw rather than the natural result of having no time or money for a personal life because I was funding theirs. She'll get over it, Mom said with finality. She always does. Rachel's not the type to hold grudges. The recording ended there, leaving me sitting in my apartment with the weight of their contempt pressing against my chest like a physical thing. They didn't just take my money. They took it with full knowledge of what it cost me. They saw my sacrifices not as generosity but as evidence of some essential weakness, some character defect that made me easy to exploit. I was not their daughter. I was not their sister. I was their mark. The nausea hit first, sending me stumbling to the bathroom where I dry heaved over the toilet, my body rejecting the truth my mind was being forced to accept. When the wave passed, I splashed cold water on my face and stared at myself in the mirror. I looked exhausted. When had that happened? Dark circles under my eyes, sharp angles where my face had thinned from stress and poor eating habits. At 36, I looked older than my mother. This was what 18 months of being the family ATM had cost me. Not just money, though the financial damage was catastrophic, but my health, my relationships, my sense of self-worth. I'd turned myself inside out trying to save people who saw my efforts as nothing more than their due. Back at my dining table, I opened a fresh spreadsheet and began calculating the true cost of their gratitude. The initial bailout, $87,000. Monthly temporary support averaging $3,800. Emergency expenses another $43,000 over 18 months. The Malibu trip $45,000. Total $243,000. $417. Nearly $250,000. My house down payment. My retirement security. My emergency fund. My future. All gone. Transformed into their comfort while they discussed my gullibility over champagne I'd unknowingly purchased. But as I stared at the numbers, something unexpected happened. The hurt began to crystallize into something harder, cleaner, something that felt almost like relief. For the first time in 18 months, I could see the situation clearly. No guilt clouding my judgment, no family loyalty distorting the facts. Just simple arithmetic and the recorded sound of their laughter. They'd played a long game, And they'd played it well. Gradual escalation, emotional manipulation, the steady erosion of boundaries disguised as family obligation. They'd turned my love for them into a weapon against me, my sense of responsibility into a chain that bound me to their needs. But they'd made one critical error. They'd assumed I'd never fight back. The revelation came at 2:30 in the afternoon, while I was mechanically eating a microwaved burrito and staring at the wall of financial devastation I'd spread across my dining table. My mind kept circling back to something Dad had said during one of his panicked phone calls 18 months ago. We need to protect the house from creditors during the investigation. The investigation? The restaurant's failure had triggered some kind of financial review insurance claims, vendor disputes, tax complications. Dad had been terrified that creditors might come after their personal assets, including the house. That's when the memory surfaced like a bubble rising from deep water. The quitclaim deed. I'd driven to their house on a rainy Thursday evening, documents spread across their kitchen table, a notary public waiting impatiently while she explained the paperwork. Dad had been sweating despite the cool weather, his hands shaking as he signed document after document. It's just temporary, he'd explained, not meeting my eyes. To protect the house while we sort through this mess. Once everything's settled, we'll transfer it back. But if the worst happens, at least the house will be safe in your name. The notary, a stern woman in her 60s, had looked at me directly. Miss Monroe, do you understand that this quitclaim deed transfers full ownership of the property to you? Your parents will have no legal claim to this house once this is filed. I'd nodded, focused on helping my family through their crisis. It seemed like a technicality, a legal maneuver to protect them from the consequences of Dad's failed business venture, an act of love wrapped in legal paperwork. Of course we trust Rachel, Mom had said, squeezing my hand. She's our daughter. This is just paperwork to keep the bank from taking our home. I'd signed without hesitation, filed the paperwork myself to save them the fee, and promptly forgotten about it. In my mind, it was their house. I was just holding it in trust until the legal troubles passed. But legally, technically, officially it was mine. I dropped the burrito and rushed to my bedroom, digging through the filing cabinet where I kept important documents, birth certificate, passport, college transcripts, and there a manila folder labeled Family Legal. The quitclaim deed was exactly where I'd filed it 13 months ago. Clean white paper, official seals, my signature and theirs witnessed and notarized. I read it 3 times, my hands steady for the first time all day. The property at 1247 Maple Street, Beaverton, Oregon, 9/7/2005, legally belonged to Rachel Elizabeth Monroe, not Martin and Ellen Monroe, not the Monroe Family Trust, me. The irony was so perfect it felt like divine intervention. In their desperation to protect their assets from creditors, they'd handed me the ultimate leverage, and in their comfort with exploiting my generosity, they'd forgotten that the gift came with legal authority. I Googled property law in Oregon, spending the next 2 hours reading statute after statute, court case after court case. As the property owner, I had the right to terminate any verbal agreements about habitation. I could sell the house without their consent. I could evict them with proper notice. 30 days. That's all the notice I was legally required to give. The realization should have felt overwhelming, but instead, it felt like the first deep breath I'd taken in months. For 18 months, I'd felt powerless, trapped by obligation and emotional manipulation, but they'd given me power, real, legal, irrevocable power, and then forgotten about it. I opened a new spreadsheet and began calculating with the same methodical precision I brought to my UX work. Every grocery bill, every utility payment, every insurance premium, every emergency expense I'd covered, month by month, line item by line item, building a comprehensive record of my financial support. The total was even worse than I'd initially calculated, $257,843 over 18 months, not including the opportunity cost of lost investment returns, the career advancement I'd missed by working constantly, the relationships I'd neglected, the mental health toll of chronic stress. But the spreadsheet wasn't just an accounting of loss. It was evidence, documentation, a paper trail that proved exactly what they'd taken from me while they laughed about my gullibility over expensive champagne. I saved 3 copies of the file, backing it up to cloud storage and emailing it to myself. Then I opened a new document and began drafting something that felt like justice. A formal accounting. Every dollar, every sacrifice, every time I'd chosen their comfort over my own financial security. Line items for groceries that fed Vanessa's expensive tastes, utility bills for a house I didn't live in, insurance premiums for people who could afford Malibu vacations. But the document wasn't meant for them. It was meant for me, a reminder of exactly what I was owed and exactly what I was willing to do to collect it. By 5 o'clock, I had a plan, not the hot, emotional revenge fantasy I'd been nursing all morning, but something cooler, more surgical, something that would give them exactly what they'd given me a choice they couldn't afford to make. The house was worth approximately $450,000, according to the most recent tax assessment. Even after paying off the remaining mortgage, there would be enough money to cover my losses and leave them with a modest nest egg if they chose to accept reality. But first, they'd have to acknowledge what they'd done. They'd have to face the consequences of treating their daughter like an ATM with legs. I reached for my phone and scrolled to a contact I hadn't called in over a year, Aunt Meredith, my mother's sister in Santa Fe. Meredith had been the only family member to question my financial involvement with my parents, the only one to suggest that their requests for help were becoming exploitative. Rachel. Her voice was warm with surprise. "Honey, I haven't heard from you in months. How are you holding up with all the family drama?" "Not well," I said, and found myself telling her everything. The 18 months of escalating support, the Malibu trip, the recorded conversation, the quitclaim deed, all of it. When I finished, there was a long silence. "Jesus Christ," Meredith said finally. "I knew your mother could be manipulative, but this... Rachel, they've been stealing from you." "I know," I said, and realized I was crying. I finally know. "What are you going to do?" The question hung in the air between us. What was I going to do for the first time in 18 months? I had real power. The question was whether I had the courage to use it. "I'm going to give them a choice," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "The same kind of choice they've been giving me." Aunt Meredith listened to my plan with the careful attention of someone who'd spent 30 years as a social worker, helping people navigate impossible situations. When I finished, there was a long pause filled only with the sound of her breathing and the distant hum of Santa Fe traffic. "Rachel," she said finally, "are you absolutely sure about this? Once you start this process, there's no going back. Your relationship with your parents and sister will never be the same." "It's already not the same," I said, staring at the quitclaim deed on my dining table. "I just didn't realize it until today." "All right, then." Her voice carried a note of grim satisfaction. "What do you need from me?" "A safety net. For them. Not me. I want to give them a real choice, not just throw them out on the street. Can you help me find work and housing in Santa Fe? Nothing fancy, but something legitimate." Meredith was quiet for a moment, thinking. "There's a resort outside town that's always looking for seasonal workers. Housekeeping, grounds maintenance, kitchen staff. They provide dormitory housing for employees. It's honest work, but it's hard work. Physical work." "Perfect," I said, meaning it. "Can you get me details, contact information, application requirements?" "I'll make some calls tonight. But Rachel, honey, are you prepared for how they're going to react? Your mother especially, she's not going to take this quietly." I thought about the recording. Vanessa's careless laughter, Mom's casual dismissal of my sacrifices. Let them react however they want. I'm done managing their emotions for them. After we hung up, I spent the evening researching property law and eviction procedures with the same obsessive focus I usually reserved for product launches. Oregon required 30 days written notice for month-to-month tenancy. even for family members. The notice had to be delivered in person or by certified mail. Once the 30 days expired, I could file for legal eviction if they refused to leave. But I wasn't planning to evict them. I was planning something much more elegant. At 11:15 that night, Meredith called back with details that made my plan crystallize into something concrete and achievable. Desert Vista Resort, she said. They need 3 positions filled immediately, 2 housekeepers and 1 groundskeeper. Housing provided, meals included, health insurance after 90 days. Starting pay is $15 an hour, 40 hours guaranteed. It's not glamorous, but it's stable. What about the housing? Clean, basic dormitory rooms, shared bathrooms, small kitchens. Think college dorm meets budget motel. They allow families to share larger units if multiple people are employed there. I wrote down every detail: contact names, application procedures, start dates. This wasn't about punishment, it was about reality. A chance for my family to understand what it meant to support themselves, to work for money instead of simply expecting it to appear. There's one more thing, Meredith said. The position starts Monday. If they're interested, they need to be here by Sunday night for orientation. Monday, 5 days from now. That's perfect. The next morning, I called in sick to NovaPixel again and drove to a real estate office in Beaverton. The agent, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s named Patricia Wells, looked skeptical when I explained what I wanted. Why you want to list a house for sale immediately, but you don't want the current occupants to know until after you've secured a buyer. The occupants are family members who've been living there under a verbal agreement, I said, sliding the quitclaim deed across her desk. I'm the legal owner. I want to sell, but I'd prefer to handle the transition as smoothly as possible. Patricia studied the deed carefully, then looked at me with new interest. Family disputes over property can get ugly fast. Are you prepared for that? I'm prepared for whatever happens. She made copies of the deed and pulled up comparable sales in the neighborhood. In this market, we could probably get offers within a week, maybe sooner. $450 to $475, depending on condition. You'll want a quick inspection to identify any major issues. Schedule it for Friday afternoon, 2 o'clock. I'll make sure no one's home. By Thursday evening, everything was in place. The house would be inspected Friday, listed over the weekend, and with luck, we'd have offers by early next week. The job applications for Santa Fe were completed and ready. I'd transferred enough money into a separate account to cover their moving expenses and first month's living costs, a final gift that would let them start over if they chose to. But first, I needed to get them out of the house for the inspection. I drove to Beaverton Thursday night, timing my arrival for just after 7 o'clock when I knew they'd be settled in for the evening. The house looked exactly the same as always: the lawn I'd paid to maintain, the windows I'd insured, the roof I'd helped repair. From the outside, it looked like a normal family home. The smell of expensive takeout greeted me at the door. Thai food from that place downtown that charged $30 for pad thai. Vanessa was sprawled on the couch in new yoga pants that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget, scrolling through her phone. Mom was in her chair, reading a book I'd seen advertised for $28 in hardcover. Dad was in his workshop, probably working on another project funded by my credit. Rachel. Mom looked up with genuine pleasure. What a nice surprise. We weren't expecting you tonight. I brought you something, I said, pulling 3 envelopes from my purse. Consider it a late birthday present to myself. Vanessa looked up from her phone with mild interest. What is it? I handed out the envelopes, identical cream-colored stationery, each one marked with a name in my careful handwriting. Open them. Inside each envelope was a reservation confirmation for the Coast Range Resort, a lovely property about 2 hours west. 3 rooms, Friday night through Sunday morning, all meals included. A weekend getaway to celebrate new beginnings and family time. Oh, Rachel, Mom said, her eyes brightening. This is so thoughtful. But honey, you've already spent so much. Don't worry about the cost, I said, meaning it in ways she couldn't imagine. You deserve this, all of you. Time to relax, to think about the future, to plan your next steps. Dad emerged from his workshop, wiping his hands on a rag. "What's all the excitement?" "Rachel's treating us to a weekend at the coast," Mom explained, showing him the confirmation. "Isn't that sweet?" "Very sweet," he said, but his eyes were wary. He knew me well enough to recognize when I was being careful with my words. "The reservations are for tomorrow night," I continued. "Check-in is after 3. I thought you could drive up Friday afternoon, have a nice dinner, spend Saturday at the spa or on the beach, come back Sunday evening refreshed and ready for whatever comes next." "That sounds wonderful," Vanessa said, already back to scrolling her phone. "I could use some beach time. It's good for my creative process." I almost laughed. Creative process. As if exploitation was an art form that required inspiration. "Great," I said. "Just promise me you'll all go together. Family time, no backing out, no changing plans. This weekend is important." They promised. Of course. Why wouldn't they? Free vacation, expensive resort, someone else paying the bills? It was exactly what they'd come to expect from me. I left that night feeling lighter than I had in months. Friday afternoon, while they were checking into their coastal retreat, the inspector would examine the house I legally owned. Saturday, while they were getting massages and eating meals I'd ironically paid for, the listing would go live. By Sunday evening, when they returned expecting nothing more than a pleasant end to a free vacation, everything would be different. They'd taught me well over the past 18 months. Sometimes the most effective manipulation comes wrapped in kindness, presented as a gift. I was simply returning the favor. Friday morning dawned gray and drizzling, typical Portland weather that matched my methodical mood perfectly. I sat in my car across the street from the house at 9:45, watching through rain-streaked windows as my family loaded their weekend bags into Dad's SUV. Even from a distance, I could see Vanessa's oversized suitcase probably packed with clothes I'd unknowingly funded, and Mom's careful attention to her makeup despite the early hour. They were excited, genuinely, visibly excited about their free weekend getaway. The irony would have been funny if it weren't so perfectly fitting. Dad backed out of the driveway at 10:15, and I waited another 20 minutes before driving away. The inspector wasn't due until 2 o'clock, but I had other preparations to make. I spent the morning at Nova Pixel, catching up on the work I'd missed during my sick days and preparing my team for what might be an extended absence. My manager, David, noticed my unusual efficiency. "Everything okay? Rachel, you seem different today." "Just focused," I said, which was true enough. "I might need some time off next week. Family situation?" He nodded sympathetically. David had heard enough about my family's financial troubles over the past 18 months to understand that family situations, in my case, usually meant crisis management. At 1:30, I met Patricia Wells at the house. The inspector, a thorough man in his 60s named Bob, was already walking the perimeter with a clipboard and a flashlight. "Nice property," Patricia observed as we watched Bob examine the foundation. "Good bones. Well maintained. Your family's taken care of it." "My family's taken care of it." The phrase stung with its casual assumption. Yes, the house was well maintained with money I'd provided for repairs, landscaping, pest control, everything that kept a property in selling condition. Bob's inspection took 2 hours. Minor issues, some loose trim in the kitchen, a slow leak in the guest bathroom, outdated electrical in the basement, nothing that would significantly impact the sale price. "I'd estimate $460 to $475 in this market," he told Patricia as he packed up his equipment. "Maybe higher if you get the right buyers. It's a seller's market right now." After they left, I walked through the house alone for the first time in months. It felt strange to be there without the weight of obligation, without calculating what needed to be paid or fixed or managed. Just me and the walls that held my childhood memories. In the kitchen, I opened the refrigerator out of habit. Expensive organic produce, imported cheeses, craft beer that cost $12 a six-pack. The freezer held premium ice cream and prepared meals from Whole Foods. Even their groceries were a rebuke to my years of careful budgeting. I climbed the stairs to my old bedroom. Now, Vanessa's domain. The room looked like a hurricane had hit a boutique clothing store. Designer jeans draped over chairs, expensive skincare products covering the dresser, shopping bags from stores I couldn't afford to browse. The bed, my childhood bed, was unmade, piled with clothes that still had tags attached. On the nightstand sat her laptop, closed but unlocked. I shouldn't have looked, but 18 months of violated trust had eroded my respect for privacy boundaries. Her email was open, and the recent messages told their own story. Order confirmations from luxury retailers, spa appointment reminders, a calendar invite for something called Entrepreneurs Anonymous, apparently a monthly lunch group where wannabe business owners commiserated over expensive cocktails. But it was the text message thread with Mom that made my hands shake. Vanessa R. seems weird lately. Think she's catching on? Mom, don't be paranoid. She's always moody about money. Vanessa, yeah, but the coast trip came out of nowhere. Very unlike her to just give us stuff without strings attached. Mom, maybe she's finally accepting her role in this family. About time. Vanessa, lol maybe. Though if she ever actually grew a spine, it would be hilarious. Can you imagine Rachel trying to be tough? Mom, your sister has many talents, but confrontation isn't one of them. Stop worrying and enjoy the weekend. I closed the laptop carefully, my hands steady despite the rage building in my chest. They knew. On some level, they'd always known exactly what they were doing to me. The innocence, the family loyalty, the gradual escalation, it was all calculated. And they were laughing about it. I left the house at 5:30 and drove straight to Patricia's office to sign the listing agreement. The house would go live on the MLS Saturday morning, with a note that showings could begin immediately and offers would be reviewed Monday afternoon. Are you sure about the timeline? Patricia asked as I signed the paperwork. This is moving very fast. Most people want time to prepare family members for a sale. My family will have all the time they need, I said, starting Monday. That evening, I sat in my apartment organizing the final pieces of my plan. 3 job application packets for Santa Fe, complete with Meredith's reference letters and housing information. 3 copies of my financial accounting, documenting exactly what they owed me. 3 bus tickets one way to New Mexico, departing Tuesday morning. The bus tickets were a calculated choice. Flying would be faster, more comfortable, but also more expensive and easier to refuse. The bus ticket said this is what people with limited means do when they need to start over. This is reality. I'd done everything I could to make their transition as smooth as possible while still making the consequences clear. Job opportunities, housing arrangements, transportation, even enough cash to cover their first month's expenses. It was more consideration than they'd shown me when they casually spent my savings on champagne and spa treatments. But the real gift I was giving them wasn't the job prospects or the moving money. It was the chance to discover who they really were when they couldn't rely on my financial support. The opportunity to build something based on their own efforts instead of my sacrifice. Whether they'd see it as a gift remained to be seen. At 11:43 that night, my phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. This place is amazing. Room service champagne and everything. You're the best sister ever. I stared at the message for a long time, then deleted it without responding. By Sunday evening, everything would be different. The house would be sold or close to it. The accounting would be presented. The choice would be offered. And for the first time in 18 months, I'd be free to see who my family really was when the money ran out. Sunday afternoon at 4:27. I sat in my car 2 blocks from the house, watching Dad's SUV pull into the driveway. They were back from their coastal weekend, probably relaxed and satisfied, carrying the pleasant exhaustion that comes from being pampered at someone else's expense. The sold sign had gone up that morning. Patricia had called me at 8:15 with news that exceeded even her optimistic projections. 3 offers by Saturday evening, a bidding war by Sunday morning. Final sale price $487,000. Cash deal, 30-day closing, no contingencies. I've never seen anything like it, she'd said, her voice bright with professional satisfaction. The buyers are relocating from California and they want to close as soon as possible. We could have contracts signed by Wednesday." I'd thanked her and hung up, then spent an hour staring at the number. $487,000. After paying off the remaining mortgage and real estate fees, I'd net approximately $320,000. More than enough to recover my losses and start over. More than enough to be free. Now I watched my family discover the sign from 50 yards away, my hands steady on the steering wheel. Dad saw it first, his body going rigid as he climbed out of the driver's seat. Mom emerged more slowly, her face blank with confusion. Vanessa practically fell out of the back seat, her voice carrying across the quiet neighborhood. "What the hell is that?" I gave them 10 minutes to absorb the reality, to check the sign, to circle the house looking for explanations that didn't exist. Then I drove up and parked in the driveway, blocking their escape route out of habit more than strategy. They were waiting for me on the front porch like a tribunal, 3 faces showing different variations of the same emotion betrayal mixed with disbelief. "Rachel." Dad's voice was carefully controlled, the tone he'd used when I was a child and had done something that disappointed him. "We need to talk." "Yes," I said, reaching into my car for the manila folders I'd prepared. "We do." Inside, the house felt different, smaller somehow, as if the knowledge that it no longer belonged to them had changed its fundamental architecture. I set the folders on the kitchen table with deliberate precision, then turned to face my family. "Sit down," I said. Mom started to protest. "Rachel, honey, we don't understand what's happening here. That sign." "Sit down." Something in my voice made them comply. For the first time in 18 months, they looked uncertain, off balance. Good. I opened the first folder and slid it across the table to Vanessa. "Your folder." She opened it warily, her manicured fingers fumbling with the paper. Inside, a complete accounting of every expense I could trace to her over the past 18 months. $63,247, broken down by category: food, clothing, transportation, entertainment, the Malibu trip. "What is this?" she whispered. "An invoice," I said simply. "Also, in your folder, a job application for Desert Vista Resort in Santa Fe, New Mexico. They're offering you a housekeeping position at $15 an hour, with housing and meals provided. Your bus ticket is for Tuesday morning at 9:45. I slid the second folder to Mom. Her accounting was more complex: medical expenses, groceries, utilities, insurance payments. $89,612. Her job application was for the resort's kitchen staff. Dad's folder was the thickest: $105,418. The business loan guarantees, the mortgage payments, the endless stream of emergencies that had consumed my savings. His job application was for grounds maintenance. "This is insane," Vanessa said, her voice climbing toward hysteria. "You can't just, this isn't how families work. Rachel." "You're right," I said. "This isn't how families work. Families don't steal from each other. They don't laugh about exploitation over champagne someone else paid for. They don't spend 18 months systematically draining one person's future to fund their comfort." Mom's face crumpled. "Rachel, sweetheart, you're misunderstanding the situation. We never meant—" "I have recordings," I said quietly. "I know exactly what you meant." The silence that followed felt like a physical weight. Dad stared at his folder without opening it, his jaw working soundlessly. Mom pressed her hands to her mouth. Vanessa's eyes were wide with something that might have been genuine fear. "The house sold today," I continued. $487,000. After paying off the mortgage and fees, I'll clear about $320, enough to recover most of what you've taken from me over the past year and a half. "You can't sell our house," Dad said finally. "This is our home." I pulled out the quitclaim deed and placed it on the table between us. "Your house. Check the legal documents. Dad, you signed this house over to me 13 months ago. You insisted on it. Remember, to protect your assets from creditors." His face went gray as he stared at the paperwork. That was supposed to be temporary. You said, I said I'd help you. And I did. For 18 months. I paid for everything. Your mortgage, your food, your insurance, your lifestyle. I sacrificed my savings, my retirement, my future to keep you comfortable. And you repaid me by treating me like a personal bank and laughing about my gullibility. We never laughed at you, Mom said weakly. I pulled out my phone and played the recording. Vanessa's bright laughter filled the kitchen, followed by Mom's casual dismissal. She'll get over it. She always does. Rachel's not the type to hold grudges. When it ended, the silence was absolute. So here's your choice, I said, my voice steady as granite. You can take the jobs in Santa Fe. Honest work, fair pay, a chance to build something based on your own efforts instead of mine. I've covered your moving expenses and first month's costs. It's a fresh start if you want it. Or, Dad asked, though his voice suggested he already knew, or you can figure out your own solution. But you have until Wednesday to be out of this house. The new owners take possession in 30 days, and I won't be responsible for your housing or expenses beyond this week. Vanessa exploded first, as I'd known she would. You can't do this. You can't just throw us out. We're your family. I've been thinking about that, I said calmly, about what family means. For 18 months. I thought it meant sacrifice. I thought it meant putting your needs before my own, no matter what it cost me. But I was wrong. I stood up, my movements deliberate and final. Family means reciprocity. It means consideration. It means not laughing about someone's generosity while you exploit it. You taught me what family really means, just not in the way you intended. Rachel, please, Mom said, tears streaming down her face. Don't do this. We can work something out. We can pay you back. With what? I asked. Vanessa hasn't worked in 2 years. Dad's business failed. You've spent 18 months living off my income while accumulating more debt. You can't pay me back because you've never planned to pay me back. I picked up my purse and walked toward the door, then paused. The job applications are real. Aunt Meredith confirmed the positions yesterday. It's honest work, and it'll give you what I should have given you 18 months ago, the chance to learn what you're actually capable of when you can't rely on someone else to pay for your mistakes. What if we refuse? Dad asked. I turned back to look at them. 3 people who'd shared my childhood, my history, my unconditional love for 36 years. 3 people who'd systematically betrayed that love for financial gain. Then you refuse? I said, but you do it somewhere else. I walked out of the house I'd bought them, got in my car, and drove away without looking back. Behind me! I could hear Vanessa screaming. The screaming followed me down Maple Street, Vanessa's voice cracking with rage and disbelief. I didn't turn around. I didn't slow down. I drove through the familiar neighborhood where I'd learned to ride a bike, sold Girl Scout cookies, and believed that family meant unconditional love, regardless of cost. That night, I sat in my apartment with a glass of wine, real wine, not the $2 bottle I'd been buying to save money, and waited for my phone to ring. It started at 8:37. Dad first, his voice thick with something between anger and desperation. Rachel, you need to reconsider this. We raised you better than this. Family doesn't abandon family. I let it go to voicemail. Mom called 20 minutes later, crying. Sweetheart, please call me back. We can fix this. We'll figure out a payment plan. Just don't take our home away. Voicemail. Vanessa called 6 times between 9:45 and 11:30. Her messages evolving from outrage to bargaining to threats. The last one was barely coherent. You think you're so smart, but you're just a bitter old maid who can't stand seeing other people happy. No wonder you don't have any friends. No wonder you can't keep a boyfriend. This is why everyone leaves you. I deleted them all without listening to the end. Tuesday morning, I drove past the house on my way to work. Dad's SUV was gone. The rental truck in the driveway suggested they'd made their choice, though I didn't know which one yet. I found out that afternoon when Aunt Meredith called. They're here, she said, her voice carefully neutral. All three of them. Vanessa cried for the first 2 hours. Your mother hasn't spoken to anyone, and your father keeps asking if this is really necessary. What did you tell them? I told them that sometimes necessary things feel cruel until you understand what they're necessary for. I closed my eyes, feeling something that might have been relief or grief. I couldn't tell the difference anymore. How are they handling the work? It's only been 1 day, but, well, let's just say they're learning what tired feels like. Vanessa discovered that housekeeping involves more than just changing sheets. Your father's back is reminding him that he's not 25 anymore. Your mother is the most adaptable so far, but that's not saying much. Will they make it? Meredith was quiet for a long moment. I think that depends on whether they want to make it or just want to survive long enough to find another way out. The house closed on schedule 33 days later. I stood in the empty living room where I'd opened Christmas presents and done homework and learned that love without boundaries becomes exploitation. The afternoon light streamed through windows I'd paid to maintain, illuminating dust motes in air that no longer carried the weight of obligation. Patricia handed me the keys I'd never needed and the check that represented my freedom, $319,412, almost enough to recover everything they'd taken, plus enough left over to start building something that belonged only to me. Any regrets? She asked as we walked to our cars. I considered the question seriously. Did I regret 18 months of believing that sacrifice without reciprocity was love? Did I regret trusting people who saw my generosity as weakness? Did I regret the naive hope that family meant something more than shared DNA and mutual exploitation? No, I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. No regrets. 6 months later, I bought a small house in southeast Portland with a garden and windows that faced east toward the morning light. I planted tomatoes and herbs, learned to make bread, took a pottery class where I met people who knew nothing about my family situation and liked me anyway. My phone still rings sometimes, holidays mostly. Birthdays, the kind of occasions that trigger guilt and nostalgia in equal measure. I don't answer anymore. The people who love you don't laugh about your generosity over champagne. They don't treat your kindness like stupidity or your boundaries like suggestions. Real family, the kind worth having, doesn't require you to set yourself on fire to keep them warm. Last month, Meredith sent me a photo from Santa Fe, 3 people in work uniforms, standing in front of the resort where they've apparently found something resembling stability. They look older, leaner, genuinely tired in a way that speaks of honest effort rather than emotional exhaustion. They look like people learning to build something with their own hands instead of taking from someone else's. I hope they make it. I hope they discover what I learned in that empty house on Maple Street, that the most loving thing you can do sometimes is refuse to enable someone else's worst instincts. But whether they make it or not, I'm finally free to find out who I am when I'm not busy paying for everyone else's choices. And that, it turns out, is worth every penny. Thank you for listening to this story of revenge and liberation. I'd love to hear from you. Where are you listening to this from? What are your thoughts on Rachel's choice? Was it justice or was it too harsh? Please subscribe to our channel, share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's start a conversation about family, boundaries, and what we owe the people who claim to love us. Your perspective matters, and I'm excited to hear where this story finds you in your own journey.